It was 2003, and my partner and I were driving deep into Twain National Forest. We were looking for a campground to try to enjoy a peaceful night in nature. The sun had already dipped below the trees, and the forest around us was getting darker. We didn't know it would be the start of our true, scary forest story. As we drove deeper into the woods, something felt off. It started as a strange sensation, like we weren't alone. I glanced in the rearview mirror, but saw nothing except the long, empty road behind us. I shook my head, telling myself I was just imagining things. But then my partner stiffened beside me. "Do you feel that?" they asked, their voice uneasy. I nodded, gripping the wheel a little tighter. The car's headlights barely cut through the darkness, and the trees loomed over us like silent watchers. Then we heard it, a sound in the distance. It was low at first, almost like a dog barking, but it wasn't quite right. It had a guttural, growling tone, something that sent a shiver down my spine. The sound grew louder, closer. My hands clenched the steering wheel, my heart pounding. My partner gasped, pointing out the window. "Look!" I turned my head just in time to see it. A massive, dark shape darting between the trees. It was running parallel to our car, keeping pace with us. My breath hitched. It looked like a dog. At least, it had the shape of one. But this thing was huge, bigger than any animal I'd ever seen. And its eyes glowed red in the darkness. "Step on it," my partner shouted. I didn't hesitate. My foot slammed on the gas, and the car roared forward. The tires kicked up dust and gravel. But no matter how fast we went, the creature stayed with us. It moved impossibly fast, running on all fours, its red eyes fixed on us like it was hunting. My heart hammered against my chest. The road twisted and turned, but the beast never fell behind. It was like it knew the forest better than anything else, weaving through the trees effortlessly. My partner was panicking, hands gripping the dashboard. "This can't be real," I muttered, but it was. It was very real. The beast let out a sound, half growl, half roar, that rattled through my bones. It was gaining on us, inch by inch. My foot was already pressed to the floor, the speedometer climbing higher, but I knew it wasn't enough. We couldn't outrun it. Then, just when I thought it was going to reach us, the road curved sharply. I yanked the wheel to the right, and for a moment the car skidded. The beast lunged forward, its massive claws scraping against the pavement behind us. But somehow, we managed to pull ahead. For miles, we didn't stop. We just kept driving, even after we could no longer see it. My hands were shaking. My partner was whispering prayers under their breath. We didn't speak, didn't even look at each other, too afraid to believe we had really escaped. When we finally reached a small town, we pulled over at a gas station. The bright lights and sound of other people felt unreal, like we had stepped back into a different world. We sat there, catching our breath, trying to make sense of what had just happened. We stayed there for a long time, neither of us willing to get back in the car. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting those glowing red eyes to appear again. My partner gripped my arm. "Do you think it's still out there?" I swallowed hard. "I don't know." The clerk inside the gas station must have noticed our pale faces. He walked over, concern on his face. "You folks okay?" I hesitated, then decided to tell him. His expression didn't change much. Instead of laughing or looking surprised, he nodded slowly. "You're not the first ones," he said. "People talk about something in those woods. A beast. A hellhound, they call it. Are you guys new to true forest horror stories about the mysterious creatures?" I felt the hairs on my arms stand up. "A hellhound? Yeah," he said, rubbing his chin. "Folks say it's not of this world. Some think it's been summoned by rituals, guarding places no human should ever go." My partner and I exchanged uneasy glances. I turned back to the clerk. "Has anyone ever seen it up close?" He shrugged. "A few claim they have, but those who get too close don't usually come back to talk about it." A shudder ran through me. The idea that this thing wasn't just an animal, but something supernatural made my stomach twist. It explained why it moved so fast, why it never seemed to tire. But what scared me the most was the idea that once it set its sights on you, it never stopped hunting. We sat in that gas station parking lot for another hour before we finally got back in the car. We avoided the forest completely, taking the longest route possible back to civilization. Even then, I kept looking in the mirrors, expecting those glowing red eyes to reappear in the darkness. For weeks, we had nightmares. My partner woke up screaming more than once, convinced the beast had found us again. I started researching, trying to find any explanation for what we saw. The deeper I looked, the more stories I found. People who had encountered the same creature. People who had heard the growls in the woods. People who had barely escaped. Some said the hellhound was drawn to fear. That once you saw it, it marked you. That no matter how far you ran, it would always know where you were. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if we really escaped that night, or if it's still out there, watching, waiting. All I know is that I'll never go back to Mark Twain National Forest again. And if you ever find yourself driving through those woods and you hear something behind you, run, because it will be hunting you, too. It was supposed to be just another drive, a peaceful, lonely trip through the backroads near Mark Twain National Forest. I had no reason to expect anything unusual that day in 2012. But as I drove deeper into the remote area, an unsettling feeling started creeping in. The further I went, the more isolated I became. The road was narrow, winding between thick clusters of trees that seemed to close in on me. Shadows stretched long and eerie, dancing in the headlights. I shook off the unease, but it was persistent, like an itch just beneath the skin. Something about that place felt wrong. I had listened to scary, true forest horror stories, but I convinced myself I was not about to experience something strange. Then, as if on cue, my truck began acting up. First, the odometer quit, just stopped moving. I tapped it with my knuckle, but nothing changed. Next, the gas gauge plummeted, telling me I was out of fuel even though I had filled up not long ago. Panic gripped my chest as every single warning light on the dashboard flickered to life. My breath quickened. What the hell was happening? The truck sputtered, jerking forward before the engine gave out completely. I coasted to a stop on the side of the desolate road, heart pounding. The silence that followed was deafening. No distant hum of another vehicle. No chirping insects. Just the steady, rhythmic drumming of my pulse in my ears. I swallowed hard and turned the key in the ignition. Nothing. I tried again and again. Still nothing. Fear set in. I was stranded, alone, in the middle of nowhere. I had no cell service. No way to call for help. The forest seemed to stretch endlessly around me. The towering trees acting like prison bars. I exhaled, gripping the wheel tightly. "Come on, baby," I muttered, turning the key one more time. Then, miraculously, the engine roared to life. Relief washed over me, but something was still very wrong. The odometer and gas gauge remained dead, as if my truck had been momentarily possessed. I didn't wait to question it. I turned the wheel sharply, deciding to head back the way I came. As soon as I did, every single malfunctioning indicator on my dashboard suddenly sprang back to normal. The gauges read correctly. The warning lights disappeared. It was like whatever had affected my truck was letting go. I didn't stick around to find out why. Slamming my foot on the gas, I sped out of that cursed place as fast as I could. When I finally got home, I knew I couldn't just forget about what had happened. I told my story to a paranormal investigator named Bud, someone who had spent his life chasing the unexplained. I half expected him to dismiss it, but instead, his expression turned serious. "I need to check that place out," he said. And so, a few days later, Bud set off to investigate the area where my truck had stalled. He was no amateur. He'd been in all sorts of eerie places before, hunting for the truth behind strange occurrences. But nothing had prepared him for what he encountered that day. As soon as he reached the spot, a deep, guttural growl echoed through the trees. Bud froze. He was an experienced outdoorsman, familiar with all kinds of animals, but this was different. It wasn't a bear, a mountain lion, or anything he'd ever heard before. It was low, menacing, and filled with an unnatural fury. Every hair on his body stood on end. The growl didn't fade. In fact, it seemed to be moving, circling him, closing in. Bud turned slowly, scanning the thick brush for any sign of movement. But the forest remained still. Then, another sound, a rustling, heavy footsteps crunching through the undergrowth. Someone, or something, was moving just beyond the trees. Bud's instincts screamed at him to leave, but his curiosity kept him rooted in place. As he strained his eyes in the dimming light, a figure emerged from the trees. A man, or at least what appeared to be one. He was just standing there, partially obscured by the branches, watching. Bud hesitated, considering his next move. Maybe this was just some lost hiker. Maybe he could ask for directions or confirmation that he wasn't imagining things. But as soon as he took a step forward, the figure began to fade. Not turn and run, not disappear behind a tree, just fade, as if dissolving into the very air around him. Then, just like that, he was gone. Bud's heart pounded in his chest. Was it the growling creature? Were the two things connected? An unsettling silence fell over the woods. No more footsteps, no more growls. It was as if the forest itself had been holding its breath, waiting. Bud didn't stick around to find out what would happen next. He turned and left, his gut telling him that whatever lurked in those woods wasn't meant to be found. When he came back and told me his story, I felt that same icy dread crawl up my spine. Something was out there in that forest. Something that could mess with a person's truck, their senses, and their very perception of reality. Neither of us ever went back to that place again. And honestly, I don't think we ever will. In 2009, I found myself drawn to a remote site within the Mark Twain National Forest, a place shrouded in legend and mystery. I was there to visit the grave of a young woman named Eliza Jane, who had died in 1897 under circumstances lost to time. Her final resting place was peculiar, far from any cemetery, buried in isolation where her house had once stood. The whispers of the locals claimed she had been a witch, and witches, they said, were never granted the peace of consecrated ground. This is based on strange, true forest stories from locals. Each time I visited, an overwhelming sadness took hold of me, as if the very air around her grave carried sorrow from beyond the veil. The day was bitterly cold, no more than 25 degrees Fahrenheit. Yet as my fingers brushed against the stones marking her grave, I recoiled. They were warm, warmer than they should have been. A tremor of unease crept up my spine as I tried to make sense of the inexplicable. Then I felt it, a presence. I wasn't alone. My breath hitched as my eyes caught movement in the trees. There, standing just beyond the clearing, was a figure. At first, I thought it was a man, a tall man, impossibly tall, at least 7 feet, draped in shadow. But then I saw them, the eyes, twin orbs of flickering, sinister light burned from his face, casting an eerie glow against the backdrop of the darkened forest. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my feet were rooted to the ground. The figure didn't move. He just stared, those glowing eyes drilling into me with an unnatural intensity. Then, in a blink, he was gone. Not like someone slipping into the forest. He simply vanished, as if he had never been there at all. Panic surged through me, and I turned on my heel, my heart hammering against my ribs. I needed to get out of there, away from whatever I had just seen. As I stumbled through the underbrush, the memory of those lights haunted my every step. When I finally reached the safety of my car, I locked the doors and sat there, shaking. Later, when I recounted my experience to paranormal investigators, they had only one theory. A demon, a creature conjured through ancient witchcraft, bound to this world through dark rituals. It wasn't hard to believe. Mark Twain National Forest has long been rumored to be a haven for witches. The stories stretch back for centuries. Tales of strange figures roaming the woods, of eerie chants echoing through the trees, of people who enter the forest never to return. One story in particular sent a chill through me. In the early 1800s, a Haitian slave named Molly lived in the area. The locals accused her of bewitching the townsfolk, casting curses and consorting with dark forces. They didn't give her a trial. They didn't give her mercy. Instead, they hunted her down, butchered her, and scattered her remains throughout the forest. But death, they say, wasn't the end for Molly. Each year, the pieces of her body attempt to reunite, drawing closer with every passing decade. And when they finally do, when the last piece finds its place, she will rise again. The forest holds many such tales. From park ranger cryptid stories, they have stumbled upon the remains of up to 30 deer at a time, their bodies laid out in ritualistic patterns, their throats slit with unnatural precision. No wolves, no bears, no hunters, just the silent remnants of something dark, something ancient. Even the notorious outlaw Jesse James once sought refuge in the caves of Mark Twain National Forest. The caves, carved by water eroding the volcanic rock over centuries, stretch deep beneath the forest floor. Who knows what secrets they hide? What spirits linger in their depths? I remember the weeks following my encounter vividly. Sleep did not come easy. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those lights, those unnatural, malevolent eyes. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me home, that something unseen watched from the shadows of my own house. Doors creaked open when no one was there. The temperature would drop suddenly, unnaturally cold, even for winter. I began to wake up at exactly 3:15 a.m. Every night, my chest tight, my breath shallow, the air around me thick with something I could not explain. I researched everything I could about Eliza Jane, but records were scarce. The few I found were old, fragile newspaper clippings with vague mentions of a young woman accused of sorcery. There was no trial, no execution records, only whispers of an angry mob and a house burned to the ground with her inside. But if she had died in the fire, who had buried her? And why did her grave feel so wrong? One day, curiosity got the best of me. I returned to the forest, determined to understand what had happened. This time, I wasn't alone. A small group of paranormal investigators agreed to accompany me, armed with thermal cameras, EVP recorders, and electromagnetic field detectors. As we approached the grave, the air grew thick and suffocating, as if we had walked into an unseen barrier. Our equipment went wild. The temperature around the grave fluctuated violently, and a deep, guttural noise, something between a growl and a whisper, echoed through the clearing. One of the investigators, a skeptic at heart, suddenly doubled over, clutching his stomach. He gasped, swearing that he felt something inside him twisting, as if unseen hands were clawing at his insides. We dragged him away from the grave, and as we did, the sound stopped. The air lightened. Whatever had been there had released its grip for now. That was the last time I set foot in Mark Twain National Forest. I haven't returned to Eliza Jane's grave since that night. Not because I don't want to, but because something tells me that if I stand before that grave again, I might not walk away next time. And if I see those glowing eyes once more, I may not be able to run at all. Even now, as I write this, I feel a presence lingering just beyond the edges of my perception. Perhaps I brought something back with me that night. Or perhaps some doors, once opened, never truly close. I still remember the day like it was yesterday. It was the year 2000, and I was chosen for something that would change my life forever. The elders of my tribe had selected me to learn one of our most sacred and ancient secrets. I was filled with both excitement and fear as I stood before the wise elder who would lead me to this mysterious place. Before we set out, he gently placed a blindfold over my eyes. "This is a journey of trust," he whispered. "You must not see the path, only feel it." I nodded, feeling my heart race as he took my hand and guided me forward. I could hear the rustling of leaves beneath my feet and the soft whispers of the wind weaving through the trees. My senses were heightened as I tried to take in everything around me, even in darkness. After what felt like an eternity, we came to a stop. The elder removed the blindfold, and as my eyes adjusted, I gasped in awe. I was standing inside a massive cavern, a place unlike anything I had ever seen before. The walls were covered in symbols, intricate markings in a language I did not recognize. Some looked ancient, others seemed almost otherworldly. The air felt thick with history, with secrets untold for generations. My breath caught in my throat as I took in the sight before me. The cavern was filled with treasures beyond my imagination. Golden artifacts, jewels, and relics from all corners of the earth lay scattered throughout the vast space. Among them, I recognized symbols and objects from ancient Egypt, their presence here an enigma. How had they come to rest beneath the earth in this hidden chamber? The elder's voice was calm, but firm as he spoke. This place is known as the Hall of Records. It holds knowledge and truths that many seek, but few are meant to find. No one is welcome here unless the spirits allow it. A shiver ran down my spine. There was power in this place, something ancient and watching. I could feel it in the way the air seemed to hum, in the weight of the elder's words. I knew then that I had been entrusted with a great secret, one that I could never share beyond those who truly understood its importance. Years passed, and the story of the hidden cavern remained within the whispers of the elders. But as with all great mysteries, word began to spread beyond our people. One man, a paranormal researcher named Charles Teague, heard rumors of the cave, and became obsessed with uncovering its secrets. He dedicated years of his life to searching for it, piecing together old legends, maps, and clues hidden in ancient texts. Eventually, his research led him to Mark Twain National Forest, deep in Missouri, beneath what is known as the Missouri Mystery Mound. He believed the cave was hidden. Determined to see it for himself, he set out on a journey that would test him in ways he had never imagined. But the cavern did not welcome outsiders. Each time Charles attempted to get close, he was met with an eerie and chilling resistance. Mysterious figures, gunmen dressed in black, appeared from the shadows, driving him away. They were not law enforcement, nor were they ordinary security personnel. It was as if they existed solely to protect the cavern's secrets from the outside world. Who were they? Government agents? Private enforcers? Or perhaps something more sinister? Something not entirely human? Charles refused to give up. He made multiple attempts, each one more dangerous than the last. He spoke of strange occurrences, of feeling watched even when he was alone. His equipment would malfunction without explanation. He would hear voices whispering in the wind, calling his name, warning him to turn back. And then, one day, he vanished. Some say he went too far, that he finally stepped beyond the line that should never have been crossed. Others believe he uncovered the truth and was silenced. His disappearance remains a mystery, adding yet another layer to the legend of the Hall of Records. What do you think? Is the cavern real? If so, who or what is protecting it? Could it be an ancient force, guarding knowledge beyond our understanding? Or is there a human hand at play, ensuring that secrets stay buried? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. We'll pin the most well-thought-out response. If you enjoy stories of the strange, mysterious, and paranormal, be sure to subscribe to our channel. We upload at least 3 videos each week, diving into the world's most intriguing legends and unsolved mysteries. Hit the like button if you want to see more content like this. It helps us keep uncovering the unknown. Until next time, stay curious, stay questioning, and remember, some secrets are meant to stay hidden.